3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Horror Chronicles, a chilling journey into the depths of terror and the macabre. Prepare yourself for a spine-tingling exploration of haunted tales and supernatural legends from around the world. From the eerie streets of Singapore to the ancient city of London, from the haunted mansions of Ireland to the cursed ruins of Spain, we will unravel the threads of darkness that bind these hair-raising stories together. Join us as we traverse through unsettling encounters with ghostly apparitions, malevolent creatures, and unexplained phenomena that will leave you questioning the boundaries between the living and the dead. Brace yourself, for what lies ahead is a collection of bone-chilling accounts that will make your heart race, your body shiver, and your very soul tremble with fear. Welcome, dear reader, to the Horror Chronicles. To stay updated on all the latest realistic horror stories, please subscribe to my channel and check out the previous stories if you haven't already. By subscribing, you will receive notifications for future updates. So please hit the subscribe button, and if you enjoy this video, I kindly ask you to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Let's aim to reach 2,000 likes together. For many, the United States has its lion's share of scary stories and tales, especially when it comes to folk legends. However, many countries around the world have their own tales when it comes to scary stories. Here are some of those folk legends that will make your heart beat fast and your body shiver. 1. The upstairs apartment is noisy. Singapore is the island of terrifying legends. One of the popular stories also circulated in Singapore is that many families complain about the noise of children in the apartment that is located directly above their apartment, especially in high-rise apartment buildings. They hear them playing ball until late at night, and when the residents lose their temper and they get angry, they go up to the apartment that is the source of the noise. They complain about the annoying noise. But to their surprise, they discover that the apartment is empty, and when they talk to the owner of the building, they realize that the apartment was empty for months and that the previous family that lived in it didn't even have children. Another popular tale in Singapore is that of the Bishan Rapid Transit Station, which opened in November 1987, and since then, many commuters have reported seeing headless ghosts roaming the neighborhoods around the station. Do not be surprised, dear listener, because the matter did not come out of nowhere. In the opinion of some, it has something to do with building the station over the site of the old Beck Santhing cemetery. The sanctity of the dead has been violated. Employees on the night shift confirmed these tales. Some of them reported seeing coffin bearers roaming the tunnels connecting Bishan and the adjacent Novena subway station, which happened to be built over an earlier cemetery as well. Before we start story 2, do not forget to subscribe, activate the bell button, like, comment, and share. Story number 2. Dead body in the subway. Let's bid farewell to Singapore and fly to London, that ancient city famous for ghost stories and metaphysical beings, and the owner of the oldest subway in the world. In 2007, anecdotes circulated online about a fine art student who took the tube home in central London late one evening. She and another man in his mid-30s were the only passengers on a tube car until 3 other people got on. Next stop. The 3 were in a strange condition, 2 men dragging a woman, so the student assumed that the woman was drunk. The student did not feel comfortable with their presence. They looked like addicts, and she avoided looking at them. Then suddenly, the 30-year-old passenger got up and sat next to her, then whispered to her, saying that he would get off at the next station, and that he advised her to get off too. The girl felt afraid of the man, but her fear of the two men and the woman was more severe. She did not want to stay with them alone in the carriage, so she decided to get off. The girl and the man dismounted at the next station, and with some relief, they saw the train leaving. Then the man turned to the girl and told her that when the two men got into the carriage, and while they were dragging the woman with them, he saw scissors embedded in the back of her skull. She was dead. Story number 3: The Final Resting Place of Terror. Australia has its fair share of unique animals and terrifying spiders, but what you don't know is that it also has a good share of scary ghost stories and goblins. In Brisbane, the third largest city in Australia, there is an old spooky tale swirling around a street that runs through the old Toowong Cemetery. The story goes that on the side of that road there is a hill, on top of which lies the double grave of two sisters who died in a car accident long ago. And that if your car stops for any reason at the bottom of the hill, the sisters will appear and pull it slowly up, where a terrifying fate awaits you. In another cemetery called Joudna, a man said that he wanted to leave after visiting one of the graves, but he could not move his car even though it was running. He struggled with it all night, and when the sun rose over the cemetery, the car finally moved. When he reached home, he found deep scratches on both sides of his car, as if mysterious hands were holding it. For information, the Joudna Cemetery is filled with graves of people who lived in the 19th century. These include the remains of former patients of the old Brisbane Mental Hospital. One of the oldest stories, believed by many to this day, about the Brisbane Cemetery is that Jack the Bell Blood, the famous butcher of London during the 19th century, is buried in this cemetery, and his grave is famous there. In fact, the grave belongs to a man named Walter Thomas Boryat, but the name is on the tombstone. It does not bear his name, but the name of his wife, accompanied by the phrase, "burial beside her husband." This Boryat traveled to London before the 5 famous crimes occurred, and the crime stopped as soon as he left London and returned to Australia. What makes him a suspect is that he was known for his strong hatred of prostitutes, and he wrote frankly. The crimes of Jack the Ripper were all committed against prostitutes. In other words, he is a surgeon. In recent years, Boryat's grave has been vandalized several times, and no one knows who is behind it. Story number 4: The Haunted La Mosara. The once beautiful town of La Mosara in Villaplana, Spain, now echoes with haunting silence as its ruins stand guard over the plains of Tarragona. Unofficially, the town has been cursed, causing its inhabitants to flee its borders. Rumor has it that thick fog often covers the town, confusing visitors. Those who have attempted to explore the ruins of La Mosara have also reported hearing the whispering of horses' hooves from afar. Some believe that the city has a gateway to another world known as La Villa del Cis. Jumping over a certain stone outside a certain house will lead you to cross this world, where you will be greeted by terrifying creatures from the underworld. Adding to the speculations and legends, there is the alleged disappearance of Enrique Martinez Ortiz, who set out on October 16, 1991, with a group of friends to collect mushrooms in La Mosara. During the trip, Enrique lagged behind his friends, and when they turned around to look for him, he was gone, and no one saw him again. Story number 5: The Place Where Satan Appeared. Ireland has a throng of folktales when it comes to spooky ghosts and mysterious shadows. In 1766, Lord Charles Tottenham's family moved to Loftus in County Wexford, a very old mansion. When the Lord's wife died unexpectedly, he soon married another woman, hoping that his new wife would help raise his 2 young daughters. One stormy night in 1775, the Lord's children and one of his daughters were on a trip to London, and only the Lord, his wife, and his daughter, Anne, were in the palace. That night, a ship is wrecked on the shore near the palace, and a young man suddenly appears on the doorstep of the Lord's house, saying that he is the only survivor of the ship's crew. The family welcomed the young man, and he stayed with them for several weeks. With the passage of time, Anne found herself attracted to the man. They would talk for hours inside the room and play cards until late. One night, the Lord, his wife Anne, and the young man were playing cards in the hall of the palace. Anne accidentally dropped her card and bent down the table to fetch it. Here, she saw a scene that frightened her. She noticed that the young man had no feet, but hooves, and she realized that the man she was tending to was in fact the hoofed devil. Anne got up and shouted at the young man furiously, "You have feet in the shape of hooves." Suddenly, the young man's complexion changed. His face became terrifying. Then it turned into a ball of fire and flew across the ceiling before disappearing, leaving a huge hole. Anne never recovered from the shock and was struck with madness. Of course, the madness of the daughter of a classy family was a shameful thing at that time. And so that no one would know what happened, her family locked her in one of the rooms of the palace. There the girl sat for weeks, refusing food and contented herself with sitting all night and day, staring sadly. She looked to the window of the room overlooking the beach, perhaps waiting for her hoofed lover to return. And it was not long before she died in that room while sitting. And it is said that when her family wanted to bury her, they tried to spread her body, but her muscles were stiff, so they had to bury her while she was sitting. Today, the Lofts Palace is considered one of the most haunted houses in Ireland. The inhabitants of the palace for 2 centuries talked about the presence of a ghost, of a girl walking around the palace at night. When the palace was opened as a museum in 2012, many visitors also talked about strange things and sounds in the palace. You can also see the hole in the ceiling where the demon escaped after being discovered. Story number 6: Malicious Light. The folklore of Uruguay, Argentina, and Chile includes the tale of the malevolent light. In the north of Argentina, a light appears at night in the city of Mendoza. It hovers at a height of a few meters above the ground in the foot of the mountain, and many motorists, especially truck drivers, say that they saw it while walking on the road. The light is believed by the indigenous people of the area to be evil, and some visitors have claimed it is a fireball that haunts those traveling alone. There's nothing to fear when the light is white, but if it appears green or red, travelers must run for their lives, as they will have the misfortune of a lifetime. Revenge. It seems that the few who tried to find the source of the light found human remains. Story number 7. Multicultural beat. Even today, there are still parents around the world who scare their children with bogeyman stories. The monster takes on different forms and names depending on the country, region, or culture. However, the underlying message remains the same: hear the word or you will be eaten or kidnapped or tortured or killed forever. The boogeyman's hand. In Latin America, the monster is known as Coca. It can take any form, including human form, and can hide anywhere undetected. The legend of Coca is first mentioned in texts written by Diodorus Siculus Theodore or Theodore Siculian, who claimed that Iberian soldiers would chop off the heads of their enemies and pierce their heads with spears as an offering to Coca. Stephen King's version of the myth says that a coca is a body of worms that infiltrate a person's DNA before transforming into their likeness. In Portugal and Spain, the monster's head is believed to be made of a pumpkin and lit from the inside by a candle. Story number 8. Come Tomorrow. Legend has it that during the 1990s, residents of small towns and villages in the state of Karnataka in the southwestern region of India began writing the phrase, "Kneel Ba," on their walls. This came after a rumor spread of a witch knocking on the doors of houses and speaking to its inhabitants in the voice of one of their relatives. If a family member opens the door, death is the fate of the family. Families who heard this terrifying tale sought to protect themselves by writing "Kneel Ba" which means, come tomorrow, on the outer walls of their homes. When the witch approached their homes, she would recite the words and come back the next day, and this continued in an endless cycle, with the witch never being able to hurt anyone again. Today, some places still celebrate 1st of April as Nali Ba Day. In 2018, the Bollywood movie, Stree, was released, whose director said he drew some inspiration from the real-life legend of Neil Ba. Story number 9: Jealousy out of control. Those who have the opportunity to visit Amsterdam often head to Stel Bear Street. It is now part of Chinatown, but in fact it was one of the oldest neighborhoods of the city. Unfortunately, it is also the place where a cold-blooded murder took place, and the unfortunate victim's screams could still be heard throughout the night. In the early 19th century, sisters Dina and Helen fell in love with the same man. Wouter was a sailor who was in love with Dina, and sent her several letters while he was at sea. Helena intercepted the letters and burned them. When Dina realized what Helena had done, she confronted her sister, which led to a quarrel. An angry Helena pushed her sister down the stairs in their house on said Albert Street. Then I rushed after her to the basement and saw that she was still alive, so she beat her to death and left her body there. Dina's parents assumed their daughter's death was an accident, and eventually Helena got her wish when she married a heartbroken Wouter. Helena still wanders on said Albert Street, unable to rest, causing shivers that run through the bodies of the living. On stormy nights, Dina's soul howls and wails, her ghostly voice, carried by the wind, which makes those who hear it close the doors and wait for safety in the morning. Story number 10. Jungle Screaming. Dubbed the Stark Forests of Deering, Deering is famous for being one of the most haunted sites in Britain. Those who explored the forest said they heard screams coming from its depths and whispers floating behind them on misty days. Some believe the screams come from the troubled souls of those who died during the massacre of 1948, in which 20 bodies were found among the trees on November 1st. Residents who heard of the tragedy recalled seeing strange lights hovering in the forest the night before, which was Halloween Eve. Unfortunately, autopsies have not been able to determine the cause of death. Some believe that a bandit and murderer from the 18th century did not. He still wanders the forests of Deering in search of revenge on the villagers who caught and killed him. He cries out in frustration and anger often at his inability to avenge his death. If you got here, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications button to receive all videos.